Hello and welcome to the Fighting Spirit Podcast. As always, I'm Jason and I'm here to bring you your fight picks for UFC 241, where Daniel Cormier will be defending his heavyweight crown against Stipe Miocic for a second time. We also have the People's Fight of the Night, where Anthony Pettis is going to be taking on your straight G, Nate Diaz. This is going to be an amazing card. It's going to be an amazing fight. We got also some superhero-esque physiques out there, Yoel Romero, Paulo Costa. This thing is going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Let's get into it. Here's the show. All right, let's get into our main event. So this is going to be a very interesting rematch because I think in the first outing, Stipe maybe was getting the slightly better edge on Cormier early on, up until he was brutally knocked out coming out of the clinch. I think that Stipe has filled those holes in his game, and he's got an 8-inch reach advantage, and he's got the physique. He's the greatest heavyweight of all time, the most title defenses. However, Daniel DC Cormier does not get defeated by anybody except John Other Effer Pico Jones. That is the only man that defeats him, and so I think that Daniel Cormier is going to retain the strap in this one. Let's talk about why. Stipe is a great fighter, but he's a little one-dimensional. The guy has no submissions in his game. He's a typical wrestling, ground and pound, boxing fighter. His kickboxing is okay, but I think Daniel Cormier does everything Stipe does a little bit better, and he's much more well-versed on the ground. Now, that Stipe game I talked about, that ground and pound, how we saw him defeating Ngannou in the first outing, I don't think he's going to be able to impose that will on DC. We didn't see a sniff of it, a hint of it in their first outing, and that's because DC cannot hang with a high-caliber grappler like Daniel Cormier. I mean, the guy is 40 years old, but he doesn't look a day over 25 with his performances. The guy is still on top of this game. He's at peak level, and I think he's going to continue it. I think that Stipe maybe has a slight boxing edge, but when you factor in all of the dynamicism that Daniel Cormier possesses and how he can go to the ground, he could turn into a submission grappling match, he could turn into a boxing affair, he turned into a dirty boxing affair, just like the way he put him out in their first outing. And DC, that 8-inch reach advantage I talked about, that shouldn't be much of a factor. Look at when he fought John Jones, right? He did give him a run for his money on several outings, but I don't think reach was the devastating factor there. I think that DC is a master of getting inside and working guys inside of the pocket when it gets down and dirty to boxing. DC is too good. He's probably the greatest heavyweight that we've ever seen, and he's the second fiddle to John Jones, but John Jones is the GOAT. I see DC getting it done in Anaheim, California, and maintaining his heavyweight strap. All right, in our co-main event, strap in because this is going to be an amazing contest. It's going to be our straight G, our man from Stockton, Nate Diaz, taking on the guy on the Wheaties box, Showtime Anthony Pettis, in an amazing bout. So let's talk about this one a little bit because it is very close on the metric. I got 100th of a point separating these guys. However, I do have Diaz coming away the slightly better guy. Let's talk a little bit about why. When it comes to granite chins and gas tanks the size of the Atlantic, nobody has that better than Nate Diaz. He can break you with sheer cardio and onslaught. Look what he did to Conor in their first outing. Hell, look what he did to him in the second outing when he ran him ragged and had him being chased around the ring. Look what he did to Donald Cerrone. You could tell at the end of their fight, he was staring at Donald, and Donald was a broken man. When you train triathlons for fun, when you go 12 rounds sparring boxing like Diaz does to prepare for these things, you are going to get a guy that has cardio for days. And we've seen Anthony Pettis crack under heavy pressure. Look at his losses to guys like Dustin Poirier, Tony Ferguson, when he lost his belt way back when to Rafael dos Anjos. Eddie Alvarez, Edson Bar, like these guys put pressure on him, Max Holloway, and he cannot hang. And I think that's the undoing here. If Anthony Pettis can find rhythm, yeah, he's going to do damage on Diaz. It's no doubt about it. Diaz is not the most technical fighter in the world, but he's tough as hell. He's just a piece of iron. You can beat on him and beat on him like McGregor did, knock him down 3 times, but you cannot put him out. He's only been KO'd once, and we've seen this guy take a lot of damage. And when it comes to the ground game, I know that Pettis has 7 submissions to his record, but let's face facts. He's not going to out-grapple the lanky, domineering style of Nate Diaz. He's just not going to do it. I do not see him submitting him one iota. I think that the only way this thing gets to the ground is if Pettis goes for it, and then Diaz is going to consider that a holiday because he's going to be able to go to work, and I think a place where he feels really comfortable. So Pettis is going to have to keep it rangy. He's going to have to bring the showtime and get flashy, and maybe, just maybe, he can outscore Diaz early on and put a hurting on him. I don't see it playing out that way, though. With these 3 rounds, Diaz is going to be just as fresh at 15 minutes as he is at minute 0, and I think that he's going to get it done here, even though I think Pettis does ultimately possess more skills. Diaz is just that mother effer of a guy that will not go away. The Diaz brothers in general, these guys are wild cards. You throw them into any fight, and who knows what will happen. You know, we look back at Nate Diaz alone, you know, when I look at his record, should he have probably defeated Rory McDonald at the time? I think so. You know, then you're like, oh, he's facing Takanori Gomi. He'll probably take a loss on that. Oh, now he gets 3 wins in a row. Defeats Gomi, defeats Cerrone, defeats Jim Miller. Gets a shot at the title. Hey, he's on a roll. This is Diaz, right? He'll probably, nope, loses to him. You know, going forward, it was Conor McGregor fight. Yeah, McGregor's going to mop the floor with him. He's throwing gang signs with this hand. He's making balloon animals with that hand. Boom, I'm tapping you out, bitch. It's all over. And that's what I think Diaz can potentially do to Pettis. He's going to take him in dark waters. He's going to beat the crap out of him. He's going to pick up a W, and then who knows what happens then, because things get wild if Diaz defeats Pettis. The division goes on fire, and anything can happen at that point. Granted, this is a welterweight bout, but we know Diaz bounces back and forth between 155 and 170. So we don't know what could happen after that. Makes things interesting. Either way, though, picking Diaz. In our next matchup, we have 2 guys carved from granite because USADA must be sleeping, where Soldier of God Yoel Romero is going to be taking on Paulo Costa in what should be a clash of the titans, quite literally. If Marvel superhero characters could fight, this is what they would look like, and I think the result here could be devastating. Let's talk a little bit about the numbers. I think this is 2 clear advantages on either side. If this thing stays standing, it's all Paulo all day. I think he's a superior striker. Romero is explosive, and we've seen what he can do against guys like Whitaker, Weidman, Jacare, right? And he has the grappling advantage, but I think that Costa is too good. I think he's a young prospect. I think he's an up-and-comer. I think he can get it done here. Granted, Romero does train American Top Team, right? He's good friends with George Masvidal. He's good friends with all the guys down there like Mike Brown. He does train hard. He sees the best guys in the world, but ultimately, I think Costa can get it done here. I think he can outbox Romero. I think he can stuff those amazing takedowns potentially and deal with the explosiveness because he himself has similar characteristics. I see Paulo Costa getting it done here and picking up the W in Anaheim. All right, this next one is another very difficult to call one. We have Mowgli Gabriel Benitez taking on Sodik Super Youssef in what should be an amazing, amazing matchup because we have 2 guys pretty green, still on the prospect level. Well, you know what? Let me take it back for Benitez. He's not green. I just think he's still a prospect. You know, he hasn't really shown what he can do so far in the UFC. He's taken some L's like Andre Fili and Enrique Barzola, but he does have a couple recent wins, right? He defeated Humberto Bandone. We see fight last week, Jason Knight. This guy, I think, can get going here and return to greatness. He's also now training an American Top Team. He was a great role. You know, when he came into the UFC, picked up 2 wins in a row, ran into Philly, and got knocked out in the first round. So this guy's had a little bit of adversity. He's going up against a very young, very hungry Sodik Youssef, and this guy looks amazing right now. He hasn't lost yet in the UFC, defeated Shane Moraes in his last outing on March 30th, and he looks phenomenal. However, I think that we haven't really seen Youssef go up against a guy that has this kind of grappling game. So Benitez, 7 KOs and 10 submissions to his record. I think that he has a very good potential to get some takedowns here. I think that he can put him on the mat. Granted, we haven't really seen Youssef get taken down yet, but I think Benitez could impose that will, and I think his boxing is just good enough to hang with a guy like Youssef. Not to mention, we get an AKA fighter in the house, another one to go with DC. Gabriel Benitez trains at AKA. He sees guys like Islam Makhachev. He sees guys like Daniel DC Cormier and the current 155 king, Khabib Nurmagomedov. So this guy sees talent. He's going to be prepared for Youssef, and I think he gets it done here. I'd like to see Youssef win. I think he's the better prospect here still at this point, and I'd like to see him win. But ultimately, I think Benitez gets it done here, makes a little statement for himself, and proves that he's ready to fight the best at featherweight. We're picking Gabriel Mowgli Benitez in this matchup. Our next bout is going to have a stellar middleweight matchup because we have Derek Brunson taking on Ian the Hurricane Heinz, and I love Ian's story right now. Let's just get away from the numbers, but this guy went to jail, right? He was, got involved with crime, drugs. He ended up at Rikers, and he was able to come out a better man and get devoted to this sport and prove that he is an amazing athlete and get himself on the right track. And that's just his side story, but I think he also has the skills to pay the bills, as we say, because I see him defeating Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson was a prospect that I think we all thought was going to do great things in the UFC. Looks explosive, but he's always that subpar guy. He can never perform to the top level. And I don't think Ian's quite there yet, but look what he did to Antonio Carlos Jr., an amazing grappler, and shut him down. In fact, he proved that he was just as good at grappling as him. And I think Derek, good grappler himself, is not really, he crumbles under the pressure. That's really what I'm trying to say. He crumbles under the pressure. He's not that good. He lost to Anderson Silva, Robert Whittaker, Ronaldo Souza, Israel Adesanya, all the top players. Yes, he does beat guys like Dan Kelly and Elias Theodoro, but I think that Ian is going to be amongst those guys to get title shots in the future. I can see this guy climb in the ranks. I can see him getting a win here. I can see him potentially fighting Kelvin Gastelum. Wouldn't that be an amazing one? Seeing him fighting Jacare. These are the kind of caliber fights that I see coming for Ian Heinz. I think he's got the boxing. He's got the grappling. He's got the story. He's got the wins. 13-1. This guy also shuts the door, right? He has some great wins, and I just think he's going to get it done here. I think he's the better fighter. I think he's going to be on the UFC marketing machine as a comeback story for years to come. I see him defeating Derek Brunson in Anaheim. That's how we're making our call. In our next matchup at the very competitive lightweight division, we have Cassius Clay Collard. I love that fight name. That's just some great homage to Muhammad Ali. Cassius Clay. I think it's awesome. I like it. That's a solid fight in my opinion. Going up against Devontae King Cage Smith, also a good fight name. I like Cassius Clay a little more. Either way, I may be taking crazy pills here, but I think late replacement Clay Collard is actually going to get it done here. Let's talk a little bit about why. Devontae Smith is on a tear, right? 10-1. Only has KOs in the UFC, even has a KO in the Contender Series when he got his contract enter. And he's going up against a guy in Clay Collard. Now, Clay made an appearance in the UFC a few years back, right? He had an okay run. He fought Max Holloway, lost in the third round, got a couple wins. He actually fought Gabriel Benitez, a guy earlier on this card, Thiago Silva. He bounced around. He didn't really get much luck with just the one win over Alex White, but he went back to the cage, went back to the drawing board, and managed to now work his way back into the UFC. And I think that it might be his time. Let's talk a little bit about the numbers. I think Clay, is going to be outboxed all day. I think Devontae Smith's a little bit better there. However, he's also actually, another thing, he's also a Factory X product when we look over at Devontae Smith. But I think the biggest weakness of Clay Collard, or Cassius Clay, is that he suffers from grappling, right? He has a hard time with grapplers. He has 3 submission losses to grapplers. Devontae Smith just has the 1 submission victory, and he's primarily a stand-up fighter, no takedowns in the UFC, likes to keep it standing, and I think Cassius Clay can deal with this. I think that he can potentially get it done. He may even be the one to impose the ground control because he doesn't have as much to fear from a guy like Devontae Smith. He may go in and score those early takedowns, sap the gas tank from such an explosive fighter, and pick up the W that way. I can see him getting it done. The guy's 26 years old. He's bounced in and out of the UFC. He still wants it. He's still hungry. He got bounced the first time, and he went back and fought in the regional circuit to only make his way back into UFC. I don't think that this guy's going to let this opportunity slip away. He wants it. I don't think Devontae Smith has been tested yet, and I think Collard gets it done here. He's upset of the night. We're calling it. Cassius Clay Collard picks up a W in his UFC return in Anaheim. In our next matchup at the Triple C division, or the Bantamweight division, we have Corey Sandhagen I almost said defeating, but hopefully taking on Rafael Assunção, which would be an excellent matchup. So I already kind of let the cat out of the bag. I think the prospect, Corey Sandhagen, gets it done here. I think we've seen great things out of him so far, and I think it's only going to continue. The guy is 11-1. He's got great wins over John Lineker, granted split decision, but Mario Batista, L'Oreal Alcantara, Austin Arnett, and I think he's going to make a stamp on a former 135 champion, the guy, that was had TJ Dillashaw in his nightmares for years, defeating Rafael Assunção here. Now, Assunção has made a great comeback, right? Wins over Rob Font, Aljamain Sterling, Marlon Moraes, and a recent loss to Marlon Moraes in his second appearance against him, but I think that he's part of the old guard here. I think that he's a guy that his best years have gone, kind of past him. And I think that the striking of Sandhagen is going to be too much for Assunção to deal with. I think Corey Sandhagen picks up the W here. We're picking him in this bout. The Bantam showcase continues because we have two very hot prospects taking on each other, with the Bermudez Triangle, Manny Bermudez taking on Casey Kenny in what should be a very interesting fight, because we have a great grappler in Manny Bermudez taking on a little more balanced fighter in Casey Kenny. But I think ultimately that grappling lopsided nature of Bermudez is going to be enough to get it done here. I think that he uses his striking very effectively. You talk about this, to set up takedowns, to get guys into position where they go to the ground and then they crumble. He's able to sap their gas tanks, be the weight of the world on their shoulders, and ride them to victory. I think that Bermudez is that kind of fighter, and I think that Kenny is going to be another one of those victims to that style. I think Kenny has okay boxing. I think it is better than Bermudez, but I don't know if he's going to have that rangy game where he's going to be able to keep him at distance, stop him from putting the pressure on to get him on the cage to score takedowns, and then sap his gas tank and ride him to victory. I think ultimately Bermudez gets it done here. I think that he's the better fighter. However, anything could happen. This is tough. It's two hot prospects in a hot division at 135, so things could really go either way. Ultimately, though, we are picking the Bermudez Triangle in this outing. In our next one, at the 155-pound division, we're going to have Drakkar Klose taking on Christos Gallegos, the Spartan. Both these fighters come from amazing gyms, Klose coming from MMA Lab, and Gallegos coming from Black House. So top-tier gyms all the way, and skill sets are looking very good as well. But ultimately, I think that we're going to have Gallegos, the Spartan, picking up the W here. I think that he's just a little bit better grappler. I think he's hanging with him when it comes to, the striking, and we have a more balanced fighter in Gallegos. Drakkar Klose, 4 KOs over his 11 fights or 10 wins. Doesn't have the highest fight IQ, though. I don't think he's shutting the door on guys enough. He hasn't actually had a victory by submission or KO since he entered the UFC. His last stoppage was in 2015. I don't think he has what it takes here to defeat Gallegos, who is getting it done in pretty good fashion. He's shutting the doors on guys well here in the UFC, granted by unanimous decision himself, but I think ultimately he's the better fighter here, and he could potentially get a stoppage because of that high IQ fight nature. Also, like I said, great products. I think Black House is slightly better than MMA Lab, just my personal opinion, so I am giving him a slight edge there. Either way, we're picking Gallegos in this matchup. This next one, I think, here is a little bit more of a you pick 'em. We're going to have Hannah Seifers, the Shockwave, taking on Jody Escobar, and this is going to be, I think, an okay fight. I don't have much to say about this one, really. So we have Escobar, who is a Jackson Wing fighter, comes out of a great camp, but she's looking at 3 straight decision losses in a row to Cobel Caves, Jessica Aguiar, and Angela Hill. Granted, they are good fighters, but she doesn't yet have a win in the UFC. I think she's on the verge of being cut, and she's taking on Hannah Seifers, who's been a little bit up and down, loses in her first outing in the UFC to Macy Barber, picks up a win against Polyana Viana in a split decision victory back in March. So kind of bouncing around. Both of these are, I think, both these fighters are basically on the teeter-totter of staying or getting pulled from the UFC. And ultimately here, I think Seifers gets it done. I think Escobar, for the quality camp that she's at and what we've seen out of her so far, she doesn't have a really high fight IQ, just a 1 KO, 5 decisions for her wins with 4 decision losses, 1 submission. I just don't think she has the fight IQ. I don't think she's the kind of person that should be in the UFC at this point. I think that she's on the verge of being bounced, and that's just kind of how I see it playing out. It's not that I think great things about Hannah Seifers. I think she's okay. I think that she could potentially, stop Escobar in dramatic fashion, and we could all go, okay, now we think that she could take on somebody else at 125. But unless she puts on that kind of performance, I don't know what we'll say about Seifers in the future, but I think she has enough in the bank to pay the bill here and knock out Escobar and send her packing out of the UFC. We're picking the Shockwave Seifers in this matchup. In another preliminary bout that I think is pretty tough to call, we're going to have Brandon Killer B. Davis taking on Mr. Perfect Kai Young Ho Kang in what should be an okay one as well. So we've seen okay outings from both of these guys. We have Brandon Davis, who's coming off a win against Randy Costa. He lost to Zabit, lost to Enrique Barzola. And then we have Kai Young Ho Kang, who defeated Irahara, but lost to Ricardo Ramos. Then he got some other W's back against Guido Canati. And he's had an okay run in the UFC. I'm not really sure what to make of these guys yet, though. The numbers look pretty even on them. I think Davis is the better striker here. I think Kang is the better grappler here. And that's where I think he ends up making his case here. I think everything else for these guys are fairly equal. Similar records, similar quality gyms, similar ages. These guys are very tight in terms of their, athletic appearances and physiques and techniques and everything. I think ultimately, though, I think the grappler is able to get it done here. Unless Brandon Davis can really put some damage on Ho Kang early, I think that Ho Kang's just going to grind it out, put him on the ground, sap his gas tank like we talk about. I think he's going to pick up the victory here. So ultimately, we are picking Mr. Perfect in this fight. In our last one, which is also pretty much a you pick 'em, we have Sabina Mazo taking on Shanna Dobson in what should be a pretty close fight. So I see this one mostly staying standing. I think that Mazo has a slightly better striking, but neither one of these fighters has a submission to their record. We have Mazo, who does fight at King's MMA, solid quality fight gym. She has 2 KOs going up against Dobson, who is 3-2 with 1 KO to a record. So I don't know what to really make of these fighters at this point. It's borderline a debuting bout, and there's not a whole lot to go on. But I think Mazo's a slightly better fighter here. The Colombian Queen, I like her fight name. She's also the better-looking fighter. I'm just going to throw that out there. I think that she's ultimately going to get it done here, and I think she's going to pick one up at Ladies Flyweight. So like I said, we are picking the Colombian Queen Mazo in this matchup. All right, let's go over them one more time. We have Cormier, Diaz, Costa, Benitez, Heinz, Collard, Sandhagen, Bermudez, Gallegos, Seifers, Kang, and Mazo to round things out in Anaheim for UFC 241. So that takes us on to housekeeping. So you can get in touch with the Fighting Spirit Podcast at fightingspiritpodcast@gmail.com. The email is down in the description on YouTube or your podcast app of choice. Speaking of which, there's also the Patreon down there as well. If you'd like to support the show, if you love the content, you want some bonus extras that I give out, please support the show at the dollar amount that makes the most sense to you. I would love to have that support. Also, we don't have a mailbag this week. I'd love for somebody to write into the show. I tried to get on Twitter. At MMA Fight Picks 01 is the handle. So please get in touch with me. Follow me there. I'd love to get a little dialogue going. So please, get in touch there. It is super appreciated. You also can listen to us on YouTube if you're happen to listen to us on a podcast. If you are on YouTube, though, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. I'd love to, get a little more going here. I've seen some comments kind of percolating up now on the videos, and things are kind of moving in the right direction, and I really just want the engagement. That's really what it's about. I just want to get, engagement from people, writing into the show, making it a little more fun for me, and, I really look forward to those mailbags, so I just would like to get a few more out there. All right, so that brings us to the end of the episode. So I'll be back with a retrospective. I'm not sure what my viewing situation is going to be. I said I wouldn't be able to see the fights on the last retrospective show I posted, but I might be able to see at least some of them at this point. I'm really hoping to catch the co-main with Pettis and Diaz, and obviously the main event with Cormier and Stipe. We'll see how that one plays out, though. I'll definitely give a retrospective as best I can. Might be a shorter show just to go over kind of the results of our picks, but we'll see how it plays out. Either way, though, until I speak with you again, happy fight picking.